And good evening, everyone that's watching online on the Cincinnati Railroad Club's YouTube channel, and also to everyone that's here in the Newsreel Theater. I'm Jonathan Higgins, and tonight we're taking a Railfan's Ramble around the Northeast. I'm excited to be able to do this presentation. This is actually the second presentation I've done for the club. Been looking forward to this for quite a while. So let's take a look at the next slide. A little bit of background about me. I've been a rail fan for over 30 years. I've lived in Massachusetts, North Carolina, Ohio. I'm an N-scale modeler. Unfortunately, I work full-time. And of course, you know, it's a very expensive hobby, so it's a slow progression with my N-scale layout. I'm an avid photographer, police scanner expert. I currently work part-time for Scanner Master as a consultant for their social media. I used to work full-time for over a decade with them selling police scanners. So you've probably seen online that I've hosted some classes. So hopefully we're going to have some more classes coming up in the fall. I'm going to go over that towards the end of the slideshow presentation. So I was a rail fan when I started out as a kid, and then of course I went to college, and then I situated into life, and then finally came back as a rail fan, as a blogger back in 2013. So it's 10 years that I've been doing the Train Aficionado blog. I'm also a host and producer of 2 YouTube shows, The Scanner Guys, which airs Wednesday nights, the second and fourth Wednesday night of each month, and of course Train Aficionado Live. I'm also a host of that show, also airing on Wednesday nights, on the first and third Wednesday. So I alternate in between the shows. If there's a 5th Wednesday of the month, I typically take that one off. So pretty much I'm doing a show each and every week. If you're interested in scanners, check out the Scanner Guys YouTube channel, Train Aficionado. Just go to Train Aficionado on YouTube. This is the guy that got me into this hobby. So it started out as an HO scale little layout, train set he got me. And then, we would go down to the railroad yard in Middleborough, Massachusetts, back in the day when Conrail rolled in that yard. So my dad was the first person that ever taken me rail fanning. And then over the years, we've traveled all over the place watching trains, all over New England, New York along the Hudson River, the Carolinas, Ohio, and of course, Pennsylvania. I mean, we've traveled all over east and west through the Horseshoe Curve, checking out the various spots you could go rail fanning. So we're going to start our trip up in Maine, way up north in New England. This is the Rigby Yard in South Portland. My dad and I spent a lot of time watching trains go through this yard. Very cool spot. This was actually taken at the overpass that goes over the mouth of the yard. And, I've taken several photos from there when I was a kid. And, of course, this photo when I was an adult. The Maine Narrow Gauge Railroad. I'm not too sure if any of you heard of Edaville Railroad in Carver, Massachusetts. There was a gentleman that basically started his own small railroad line to farm the cranberry bogs there. So, of course, people got interested, and he decided, maybe I can do a little tourism train. So he started out, Edaville Railroad in Carver, Massachusetts. Unfortunately, the tourism train went through several different owners, and then eventually a lot of the rolling goods were split up. The rolling stock, the cars, the locomotives, and what such. The Maine Narrow Gauge was formed in 1992 when Edaville Railroad kind of had one of its issues. So what ended up happening, a lot of the rolling stock and locomotives went up to went from Edaville Railroad to Portland, Maine. This group of people started a narrow gauge scenic ride, which is right along Portland's waterfront. It's about a 3-mile round trip, about 40 minutes. Beautiful ride because you're right along the bay. And it's on an original abandoned railroad line. So they basically put tracks down where there was originally a line, but the difference is it's a 2-foot versus the standard gauge. I used to ride a lot when I was living in Massachusetts at Edaville. So when the equipment moved up there, of course, I had to visit the main narrow gauge. Here's some photos I've taken up there. I mean, some really cool stuff, being able to get photos inside the train when they run steam. It's really awesome. They have approximately 4 steam locomotives, 2 diesel. I've actually rode on one of the cabs of the steam locomotives back when it was an Edaville Railroad, and I want to say it's locomotive number 4. Next place. So we're still in southern Maine. How many of you have heard of the Seashore Trolley Museum? All right, the Seashore Trolley Museum is located in Kennebunkport, Maine. So Portland is in southern Maine. If you travel down 95, Kennebunk is just south of there. Another organization formed by Railfans in 1939. They developed Seashore Trolley Museum. It's one of the world's first and largest mass transit museums. They have quite a collection of trolleys, but they also have a huge collection of buses as well. Here's some of the trolleys I was able to photograph. Right now, they have well over 260 cars. Last count was in 2010. So vehicles meaning, buses, trolleys, streetcars. They even have some of the old MBTA equipment for the subway. They've been able to convert it from third rail to upper pantograph. They've done an amazing job restoring a lot of these cars that you can see here. I mean, they look just as beautiful as probably when they rolled off, the assembly line when they were constructed. All right, 1 second. All right, we're going to go up to Vermont. So Vermont, I've railfanned some there. The one spot that I railfanned quite a bit was White River Junction. It's a little town that's on the outside of the New Hampshire and Vermont line. So White River Junction is located right on the line. In the mid-1800s, it was the home of 5 railroads. And during its peak, 50 passenger trains traveled through White River Junction. So White River Junction still has some railroads through there. Of course, the Amtrak Vermonter runs through there. The New England Central Railroad, the Vermont Railroad System, and then the Green Mountain Railroad. So still some railroads running through there. But yeah, this was quite a hub, and it's way up north. If you look up White River Junction, there's a cute little hotel that's right in White River Junction, and that used to be the hotel when people would have to wait for a connecting train. They would go across the tracks and stay at the hotel. But yeah, I mean, I've gotten some really cool photos up there, and of course, having a couple of different railroads, you can get some really good shots up there. I stumbled across this roundhouse. This is the Westboro Rail Yard. The roundhouse is, I'm not too sure if it's still there. They were developing all of this property, and I believe they were going to tear down most of it. So I was able to get some photos of the roundhouse. I mean, not that many roundhouses are out there. A lot of them have either been torn down. Some of them hopefully have been restored and repurposed. This one was in dire shape. If you look at it from Google Earth, you could see holes in the roof, looking overhead. So I'm not too sure how much they were able to salvage, or they may have knocked this building down. This was taken many years ago, so I haven't been up to White River Junction in a while. So this is basically on the New Hampshire side. So it's a quick, short drive from White River Junction. You hop in the car if you were right at the station. It's 5 minutes over, and you're right into New Hampshire. All right, so we're going to go into Massachusetts. We're going to spend some time in Massachusetts. Of course, this is my dad and I on the outside of a Bay Colony locomotive. This is in Millis, Mass. This locomotive used to be parked in Taunton, Massachusetts, and my dad and I would frequently visit it. Middleborough wasn't too far away from Taunton, so my dad and I would often see if it's there. And I'd probably got, as a kid, probably a million photographs of this locomotive. So one day we paid a visit to it, and I said, "Dad, you want to take a photo by the train?" So sure enough, we did. So we'll start our trip in Massachusetts at Boston's North Station. Now, many of you, if you're a Celtics fan or a Bruins fan, you're probably familiar with the facility that they operate in. It was called the Fleet Center, the Boston Garden. It's had several names. So the station is actually just below the Boston Garden. And you can see the platforms there and, of course, the bridge going over the Charles River. And this bridge was actually built in 1931, and it basically has two large weights, and the bridge basically goes up. This was a great spot for railfanning for me whenever I went to Boston. There's a pedestrian footbridge that goes over the railroad. Great spot. I could see everything coming out of the station and going in. The great thing about this station is you're also able to capture MBTA trains and Amtrak as well. Here's some more photos from Boston's North Station. So these are the railroad lines that actually come out of there. So you're able to get commuter rail for Fitchburg, Lowell, Haverhill, and Newburyport and Rockport lines. So several commuter rail lines run out of this station. And then, of course, Amtrak's Downeaster, which is a really great ride coming out of Boston and then going up points north up into Maine. Eventually, they want to extend out that service all the way up to Bangor, Maine. If any of you are familiar with Bangor, that's way up north. So basically, it goes into Portland and then slightly further north from there. Here's another photo. I was able to get this going into North Station, and I was purely lucky to be able to get three locomotives kind of really lined up right next to each other. You can see there that these two locomotives, when they stopped the station, they literally lined them up so they were side by side. The two locomotives that are closest to us in the photograph are the newer locomotives that the MBTA is using. They've been having a lot of issues with them when they rolled them out. They've been repairing them, sending back off to the manufacturer. I'm not 100% certain what the model number is, but it was a big pain in the butt, especially during the winter months when they were in the cold and they weren't working properly. So when that happened, they had to roll out some of their older equipment that they kind of semi-retired to be able to run service. I was absolutely excited to be able to visit the Boston Engine Terminal. So I'm also a member of the Mystic Valley Railway Association. They're based out of Massachusetts, and they've had a couple of trips to the Boston Engine Terminal. This is basically where the MBTA maintains a lot of its locomotives and some of their rolling stock equipment. So I was able to go in there and get up close and personal with some of these locomotives. So you can see here, we've got an MBTA locomotive on a raised track, and I was able to go inside of this locomotive and actually check this out. And this was super cool. And I was able to do this twice. The club actually had two outings. I believe it was like a good 10 years apart. But the second I saw they were doing this again, my dad and I jumped on it and we're like, all right, we're doing this. So I was really excited about going there. Able to get tons of photos. I just shared just two there. All right, so we've talked about North Station. There's also South Station, which is an actual building with nice facade. It's not underneath, the Boston Garden. So South Station, I've ridden trains in and out of there. I went to college for about 2 years in Boston. I was a commuter from Boston to Middleborough. So I rode the Middleborough line to and from college. So I've spent a lot of time in South Station. The station was built and opened in 1899, then rebuilt in 1985. And to this day, right now, it has 6 island platforms, 13 tracks. Here's some photos of the outside of Boston South Station. Of course, you know, I was able to get a historical photo that's got a nice wide shot, and then of course I was looking through my photo archive trying to find a wide shot that was similar, and of course I couldn't find one, so I have the little tighter shot there. Beautiful building. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent there, not only, you know, waiting on a train to leave, but just simply enjoying the opportunity to railfan there. This is looking out behind the building. This is another historical photo taken in 1904. It doesn't look anything like this right now. The people that own the property have developed above this space, putting buildings. So airspace is available. They built some buildings on top of, you know, where the trains actually come into the station. So it's kind of like, you know, the locomotives are going in underneath buildings at this point. At one point, it was wide open like this. Certainly a really cool shot, you know, being able to see everything. A lot of the towers are gone. Of course, you know, where the original towers were, there's a placard there. The building's, of course, gone, you know, when you see those towers. But I would have loved to be able to see, you know, South Station back in its heyday in the early 1900s. Of course, you know, you can see, you know, Amtrak's Northeast Corridor, their Acellas. The new Acellas, they've been testing those. I believe they're going to be rolling out those relatively soon. But yeah, I mean, being able to see these locomotives that are able to go up to about 150 miles an hour sitting there and being able to take photos of them as they're sitting waiting to head to another destination. But yeah, this was super cool just being able to see those. I do kind of miss being able to get Amtrak anytime I want. As you know, Jim was talking about, you know, during, you know, here, unless it's extremely late, you're going to get some good photos of it. So with Amtrak here. So we move further down the Northeast Corridor. And this is one of the most popular places for rail fans, young and old. And I see a lot of younger people rail fanning in Mansfield, Massachusetts. This is located about 24 miles south of South Station. You're able to get, of course, MBTA commuter rail, which runs from Boston to Rhode Island. And this is one of the trains heading southbound. Just to give you a little bit of a lay of the land, you see on the screen that track that's bending off to the left. That is the CSX Framingham Secondary. Now that goes out to and passes Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. So if many of you are familiar with the Patriots, that line goes right past there. The state of Massachusetts bought the line, I want to say it was $23 million. They paid $1 million a mile. So the state of Massachusetts is buying a lot of the old rail lines because they don't want them to be abandoned, and they want to repurpose them eventually for maybe some sort of commuter or passenger service. But yeah, that track there, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of slides, but I wanted to point that out. So what we see, CSX still uses that line, but the state of Massachusetts owns it at this point. Here's some of the action that you can see in Mansfield. Of course, you know, an Amtrak Acela there. We've got an MBTA locomotive there. That's the control car, so they'll run a locomotive on one end and a control car on the other end. Typically, when trains are leaving either South or North Station, the locomotive is heading out of the station, and then the control car will be what's taking the train back into Boston. And that's typically how they run many of their commuter rail trains. The only time they run locomotives on each end is when they run their event train, which is called the Cape Flyer. They run locomotives on both ends. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Cape Flyer coming up in a little bit. And there is a CSX train coming off of that Framingham Secondary. So as I mentioned, Amtrak Acela, Northeast Regional, and of course you see some local CSX action, and then the MBTA Providence line running through here. Typically, for people that are rail fanning, during the week is your best opportunity to be able to see CSX rolling through Framingham. They'll service a couple of industrial parks, so they'll bring they'll bring cars, dropping them off, picking them up, and then they'll also run down occasionally to where I used to live in Attleboro, Massachusetts, before I moved to North Carolina. A train would run down the corridor down to Attleboro, which is a few towns south of Mansfield. Walpole. So this is on the Framingham Secondary, and this is one of the diamonds that are located in Massachusetts. So this is a Union Station. It originally was the junction of the Norfolk County Railroad and the Mansfield-Framingham Railroad back in the day. But now the line is used by the MBTA. Pretty much I believe they own both tracks now. And I'll show you the diamond in a second. This station here is Walpole Station for the MBTA. So they still use this station for passenger service. And then the track that's crossing, where you can see towards the rear of the building in this shot, is the Framingham Secondary. So here's a little bit of information about the depot. It was rebuilt in 1893 when the original station caught on fire. So I'm happy that they were able to rebuild it. And originally, at one point, this station would see passengers on both sides because there was a diamond there. So let's take a look at some more shots here. Here's an older photo of the Walpole Union Station. This is in 1911. This is on the other side. So this is basically the Framingham Secondary, which is known as what it's known today, and then the other track was what we were looking at earlier. Here's the diamond, and of course, CSX stores a few of their cars there. So this was a great spot to be able to get some locomotive photos, and occasionally, if you're lucky enough, be able to see them doing some yard moves. And pretty much locals run out of here. They'll run up to Framingham, and then when they go up to Framingham, they would be on the CSX Boston sub. And as I mentioned, the MBTA commuter rail has Foxborough and the Franklin line. So the Franklin line runs on that other track, and then the Foxborough trains actually go to Gillette Stadium. So Bob Kraft, that owns Gillette Stadium, has a station at Gillette Stadium, and typically that station is used for game days. So of course he convinced, why don't we have an MBTA commuter rail stop all the time here? So he was able to finagle it, and he has a commuter rail stop at Gillette Stadium. And basically at Gillette Stadium, of course, you have the games there, and he also built a huge shopping center there. So, of course, it brings in money, in the off season when the Patriots are not playing. But yeah, he was able to finagle that, and portion of the Mansfield Secondary is used now because of that station stop. So we take a journey down to Cape Cod. I'm not too sure how many of you are familiar with Cape Cod. Those of you that may know Massachusetts, they think that the Cape Cod's their own state. They kind of think, Massachusetts, Cape Cod, we're special. So a lot of times that's usually what they think. So one of the coolest places to rail fan, and especially during the summer months, is the Cape Cod Railroad Bridge. This is a beautiful bridge, and it's amazing to be able to see it go up and down. So the bridge opened in December of 1935 and spans over the Cape Cod Canal 544 feet. And when the bridge is in its up position, it's 135 feet over the canal. Now, the reason why they put this bridge is a lot of ship traffic goes through the canal. So rather than having the canal blocked all the time by a bridge, but having to go up and down, basically when there's not a train scheduled to go over this bridge, the bridge is always in the up position. Here it is in the up position. This is one of those postcard photos. You can see a larger boat able to get underneath the bridge without a problem. This is pretty much what the canal looks like. It's a man-made built canal. I'm guessing a lot of boaters didn't want to go around Cape Cod, so this allows them to kind of cut through that section and head either south or north. Here's some photos of the Cape Cod bridge. The one in the top left is the bridge in its down position. So you can see up in the towers weights. So those weights will go up when the bridge goes down, and of course when the bridge goes up, the weights will go down. So we actually are able to get some passenger service heading over the Cape Cod Railroad Bridge. They have their scenic train, which runs during the summer months, which is the Mass Coastal Railroad. Will run the Cape Cod Central Railroad. They're kind of tied together. And they'll run passenger service over the bridge, to Buzzards Bay. They'll also, I believe they have a Christmas train that they run too over the bridge as well. There's also freight service that goes over. The Mass Coastal will do what's called the energy train. So of course Cape Cod, they got to export their trash out of the Cape Cod, and then it goes up to I can't remember what the new name of the place is. It's called CMAS. So basically they burn the trash, and that's inland in Massachusetts. The bottom photograph here is the MBTA. This is the Cape Flyer. So the MBTA, actually, somebody had a great idea, and they said, why don't we run a weekend event train? So during the summer months, on Memorial Day through Labor Day, the MBTA will run service down to Cape Cod. Coming out of South Station, running down the Middleborough line, and then right on the Cape Main track. So they run a train on Friday nights from Boston to Hyannis, Massachusetts, and then it'll deadhead and head back into Boston. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, the southbound will come down in the morning, heading down to Hyannis. The crew will have a layover in Hyannis and then head back to Boston in the evening. So for the traveler that wants to go visit Cape Cod for the weekend, maybe they come down on a Friday night, get into Hyannis. Once they get into Hyannis, they can take a bus or rent a car and travel all over the Cape. They kind of avoid the Cape Cod traffic because it brings them right down in the heart of Cape Cod. And then, of course, they can, do a day trip on either a Saturday or a Sunday, or they could stay the whole weekend and then take the train back to Boston in the evening on a Sunday night. So they created this event train. Tell you a little bit of a story about it. So I rode the initial ride. So this was before it was open to the public. They did a test run. They had tickets available. So I was on this train, heading out of Boston, heading down to Cape Cod, and basically it was going to deadhead back. So it allowed people to ride the train. So it had all the bigwigs on there. It was the general manager of the MBTA and all that. So the MBTA, as I mentioned earlier, don't run a locomotive on both ends. It's control cab on one, locomotive on the other. So, of course, I had my scanner with me. I'm listening to the scanner. We pull out of South Station, and the engineer says, I've got some sort of communication error in the cab. So we're stopped outside of South Station for a bit. So I see the MBTA's general manager was Beverly Scott was the manager at the time, and of course we had people on the train, maintainers and such. Of course, they went racing up to the locomotive. So finally, they were able to address that issue, and I think Beverly Scott said, "As soon as you get this on the Middleborough Lakeville line, give it hell." And sure enough, I was looking out the window, and we were whizzing by these stations. I mean, there's stations in the Brockton stretch that are right in a close proximity. It's Montello, Brockton, and Campello. Not too sure if I'm mixing up the order, but they're 3 city stops, and we were whizzing by that. So I ended up downloading an app on my phone. You know how you can download one of those speed apps? We were going over 100. Now, I'll tell you, when I went to college on this line, the trains weren't going 100 miles an hour on that track, but that day we were cranking. So the second we got going, we were cranking down that line. Then once we got on the Cape Main track, those tracks weren't able to handle those speeds. So of course we went down to normal track speed. Because she was concerned, because we said that we were going to be in Hyannis, and of course press is going to be there. And can you imagine, the first, initial train is late, to Hyannis. So that's basically, she probably told him to give it hell. So I rode the Cape Cod Flyer several times. I rode it with my friend Will, and then of course I rode it with my dad as well. I mean, it was fun, just being able to take a quick ride on there. So we go to Worcester, Massachusetts. So we're in central Mass now. This is another cool spot. CSX runs out of here, Providence, Worcester, which is now P&W. A lot of rail fans have coined the P&W as the candy corn trains, because they look like candy corn when they repaint them. So we're looking at a junction here where CSX and the Providence Worcester branch kind of get together. This is the station, and it's still there, and it's beautiful. The station, let's see, do I have any details on it? I'm not too sure when it was built. I'm not too sure if I put it on a slide, but this is a historical photo of the station. And I believe it went through, I did a blog entry several years ago, and they went through a whole entire renovation of the station, very much what they did here. They did a beautiful job. The first time I ever went in that station, you look around, like in here, there's things to see everywhere. The architecture is so beautiful. You look around at the walls, you're looking at the ceiling. It's one of these places you literally take it all in, just like our Cincinnati Union Terminal here. So here's some of the photos I was able to get. Of course, P&W down the bottom, MBTA, because of course, the station is actual stop, and of course CSX. All these photos were taken in one day. I was camped out because I wanted to capture photos of the last Ringling Brothers Circus train traveling through Worcester. So I took a day off from work. Of course, it was traveling during the week, so I had to take a day off from work. And I didn't know what time I was going to roll in. There's no schedule, so basically I picked a spot and hung out all day, and I knew when the train was coming because the rail fans that were chasing it all came in all at once. Thankfully, they were super polite, and they said, "Am I in the way of your shot?" Nope, because I was the first one there, so they respected, the photo line, which was great. So I was able to get several shots of the circus train. This is one of my favorite shots. It's actually on the Train Aficionado website as one of my banners. And I was able to get photos of the Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey circus train traveling through. This was a really cool shot. When it was traveling through, a lot of the performers were waving out the window. I mean, it was really cool. I was happy that, in 2017, I was able to get a photograph of this. And, a lot of people claim, with the circus trains, it was almost like getting a photograph of Air Force One, for people that are into aviation. So I was able to get this, and I was completely thrilled. I did travel. I don't have the photos in here, but I did chase it. I was able to get it in one other spot. And then I got a little greedy, and I decided to go to another spot in Palmer, Massachusetts, which I'll show some photos from there in a second. I didn't make it. I was coming up into downtown Palmer. Train was going by. If I was 5 minutes faster, I would have been able to get set up in Palmer, Mass, and be able to get photos. But I hauled, literally I went from Worcester to one other spot, and then I went to Palmer, Massachusetts, and I was hauling the mail. I mean, this is probably the craziest chase I've ever done, and I won't mention the speeds I was going. So great transition. This takes us to Palmer, Massachusetts. Very popular spot for rail fanning in western Massachusetts. It's a junction of a couple of railroads. We have, of course, yet again, CSX. So a lot of CSX traffic in Massachusetts. We also have the New England Central Railroad. We talked about that going all the way up to White River Junction, Vermont. And then we have the Mass Central Railroad, which is a short line. They've got a couple of locomotives, and they provide service out in western Mass. Now we see three railroad lines. Palmer, Massachusetts was famous for 7 railroad lines. And since then, a lot of the tracks were abandoned, or they were, a lot of railroads merged into each other. But this is known as the town of 7 railroads. Here's a few shots that I have of the rail fanning that you have there. You've, of course, got the CSX. This is a little local, heading westbound, probably towards Springfield. There is the Mass Central Railroad. Their locomotives are spotless. They look beautiful all the time. And then, of course, there's the New England Central Railroad, which was also, I believe they were bought up by the Candy Corn as well, Genesee, Wyoming. So they've repainted some of their locomotives. If I remember correctly, I think they're Genesee, Wyoming now. I may be wrong. But this used to be the town of 7 railroads. They're located on the CSX Boston subdivision at milepost 82.7. One of my favorite places to dine when I'm in Massachusetts is at the Palmer Union Station. And this station, this was prior to, of course, it becoming a restaurant. This is some of the photos from the restaurant back in the day. American architect H.H. Richardson, he's done several buildings in the New England area, several depots and stations, and this is one of them. A beautiful station, for its size. It opened back in June of 1884 and now serves as the Steaming Tender Restaurant. They've been in the building since 1987. Here's what it looks like today, the Steaming Tender Restaurant, as you can see here. And they've kept up with the railroad-related theme, so they haven't moved away from it. They embrace the rail fans when they do come out to rail fan there. If you do go out to Massachusetts, I highly recommend dining at the Steaming Tender. They are open, I believe, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Sunday. So if you come in on a Monday or Tuesday, you're going to be out of luck for dinner. I believe that's what their hours of operation. They're from Wednesday on to the weekend. Definitely check out their website. Phenomenal place to eat. What I highly recommend, save room for dessert if you're into bread pudding. Their whiskey bread pudding is to die for. It is really good. I would highly recommend any rail fan dining there. As for activity, if you're going out there to take photos, typically during the week, during the daytime, you should get some pretty decent action. CSX doesn't travel as often on the line as they used to, but you should be able to get some good local action there. And then, of course, the Lakeshore Limited travels past this station as well. Oops, went too far. Hold on one second. All right, so we're going to take it to Rhode Island, which is one of the smallest states in the United States. I did some rail fanning there as well. Northeast Corridor rolls right through the state. Just like Massachusetts, you can see the Amtrak regional and the Acela traveling through at top speeds. Through Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, you'll see these trains anywhere from 100 to 150 miles an hour. So they really haul the mail through there. So let's take a look at some photos from Rhode Island. Oops. Get this to go in the right direction. Cumberland, Rhode Island. This is a cool spot. There's a bike trail that runs parallel to the main line for Providence, Worcester. So I was able to do some biking on this bike trail and plus be able to take some photos of the train when they did roll through. They don't roll through there all the time, but you know, when you're lucky enough to get one, you certainly snap a photo. This line, pretty much Providence, Worcester, this main line runs, you probably could guess it, from Providence, Rhode Island to Worcester, Massachusetts. And of course, this is, you know, P&W and its original paint scheme there. Train traveling towards Providence, Rhode Island there. Here's another station. Unfortunately, this station is not being used, and it's probably going to be torn down at some point. Now, this is closer to Providence, Rhode Island. This is the Pawtucket Central Falls Station. It opened in 1912 and served passengers service until 1981. The photographs I was able to get from the inside of it back in the day was a pretty beautiful station. Now it's been vandalized and all types of things have happened in the inside, destroying the inside of it. And this is a station that's right on the Northeast Corridor. You can see the pantograph, the overhead power. And of course, the Amtrak rolls underneath it, and of course, the MBTA commuter rail heading out to Providence runs through there. I would have loved to be able to see the station back in its day, but yeah, it's just one of those buildings. It's just, you know, crying for help, and of course, nobody's answering the answer of the help. So eventually, I'm guessing it'll be torn down. I did a blog entry about, you know, this station in length on the website. So definitely check that out if you want to learn more about the Pawtucket Central Falls Station. So the Providence line travels as far as Wickford Junction. So this is the furthest point on the line, and you can see some photos of it. It's one of the newer stations in Rhode Island. You can see here that this track that's in the photograph all the way up to the top right is a track that comes off the Northeast Corridor and basically has a bumper at the end. So MBTA trains will go down this track, pull into this platform, unload passengers, and then deadhead back to Boston. This station's a really cool spot for getting photos, of course, of the Amtrak Acela, as you can see here. I was able to get photos of that, and then occasionally, you know, the regional as well. Then if you're lucky enough, P&W, Providence, Worcester will travel past here as well. We take our trip down to Connecticut now. Yet again, you know, another Amtrak photo here. This is the Veterans, I believe, locomotive that they painted. And I was able to get this for the first time in Connecticut. And there's several stations in Connecticut that Metro North has, and those are great stations to railfan. You can railfan publicly there without any problem, stand on the platform, take photos. Same thing with the MBTA commuter rail platforms. You know, they're not closed off to the public. You can go there, take photos, sit on the bench, and wait for a train to go by. So we're going to take a little trip into Connecticut. Oops. So the first stop that we're going to take in Connecticut is the Eastern Railroad Museum in Connecticut. So this museum is a small museum operating in the eastern part of the state, and originally was a part of the airline that ran east and west through Connecticut, and then once several railroads merged into each other, eventually this was a redundant line and was abandoned. So they run a train that on a short piece of track there, and they also have a roundhouse, and they're working on restoring, some of the equipment they have there, some of the rolling stock and what have you. And then, of course, they have a turntable. This turntable actually has a bit of a history. It originally was at Edaville Railroad. So the turntable actually was for their 2-foot gauge, and they repurposed it using it for regular gauged service here. It's not powered. It's able to be turned, by someone, holding on to that the handle that you can see there, and then moving the locomotive around the turntable. Oops. Sorry about that. For whatever reason, it wants to go in the opposite direction. Here's some more photos. As you can see here, they've got, a couple of locomotives there. They've got some older cabooses. They've got a couple of cars they can take passengers on. The turntable was purchased from Edaville Railroad in 1994. And you remember that we talked about, a lot of the rolling stock going up to the main narrow gauge museum in Portland in 1992. So in 1994, they actually got the turntable. This was moved to the site, installed by the museum volunteers. And this is one of these organizations where it's a lot of volunteers that spend a lot of time trying to, keep railroad history alive and well in Eastern Connecticut. There's one more photo of it. Essex Steam Train. So I've went out to this a couple of times. This was a photograph I've taken with my dad, and they had an Amtrak event train there. So I was able to get a photograph of the Amtrak event train along with the steam locomotive. The Essex Steam Train was originally part of the Connecticut Valley Railroad, which opened way back in 1868. The line was abandoned about 100 years later in 1968. The line reopened, for the Essex Steam Train and boat excursions. And the locomotive that you see here, the steam locomotive, was built in 1989. It's, I believe it was Chinese company that created it. So it's not an original steam locomotive, but they were able to build it. Operates just like a steam locomotive. It's one of probably the youngest steam locomotives out there, 1989. They run this for service at this museum, and if you're lucky enough, you're able to get some photographs when they're running it. Here's some more photos. Of course, they have a steam locomotive here that's set up as a display. Here's the Essex station here. You can ride on this line. You can either take round trip on the train, or you take one way on the train, and then the trip back, you take a steamboat, which is really cool. And that's along the Connecticut River. So, of course, my love of trolleys. Of course, I got a visit a trolley museum that's out in Connecticut. New Haven, Connecticut. Hold on one second. I got to plug this laptop in. So this trolley museum is not as big as the Seashore Trolley Museum, but they have a really great collection of trolleys. And oftentimes I would visit with my dad down here. It's right off of Interstate 95. It's not too far from the New York state line, so it's a bit of a ride if you're coming from Massachusetts. And they've got quite a collection of trolleys, and I'll show you some more pictures of that in a second. All right, so let's take a look at the next slide. All right, here's a couple of photos from the museum here. They have several trolley barns. Their line basically runs 1.5 miles. It's along an original trolley line, the Branford Electric Railway. And it's a beautiful ride. You can actually see some ocean views from there. So I highly recommend checking out this trolley museum. One of the hurricanes, they actually had some issues with flooding being so close to the ocean. So they ended up building a brand new trolley barn to protect all their museum pieces, especially their rolling stock of trolleys and streetcars. But yeah, I highly recommend checking this out. Another museum in Connecticut. So if you're looking to hit up a whole bunch of museums, I would highly recommend checking out this museum as well. This is the New England Railroad Museum, Thomaston, Connecticut. They operate excursions and even some freight trains along the right-of-way that they have. This was an event. They were running this steam locomotive. I don't believe it's always here. I was able to Railfan during this event, be able to get some really cool photos of the steam locomotive. I think I have some more photos. Yep. Here we go. Some really cool photos of the steam locomotive there. And also I got a photograph of their diesel locomotive that they tend to use occasionally. So if you do decide to go here, it's a 75-minute round trip. 18 miles of track. So it's a really nice ride. So if you're definitely out there, definitely check out the New England Railroad Museum. We're going to go to New York for a little bit. So I've Railfanned here quite a bit in the last several years before I moved out of Massachusetts. My dad and I frequent this line. We would basically do a long weekend, stay at a hotel, and just Railfan all day long. So we Railfanned along the Hudson River. And this is the CSX River subdivision. Runs 132 miles. Right out of New York, right along the Hudson River. Very popular Railfans for photography. There's several spots to be able to get photos spanning over the 132 miles. I really loved being able to go out here with my dad because it was a short ride from where we lived in Massachusetts, and then we were able to spend the whole weekend. And there's quite a bit of activity. The thing about it is there's several parks along the Hudson that a lot of people watch the boat traffic. So I used those parks because the railroad line was right up against those parks. I'd use those parks to watch the train traffic. So there's several different parks, people would be able to have picnics and there's tables and all that to watch the boat traffic. The line runs right along the river, so I was more focused on the rail traffic. Here's some other photos. I was able to get a couple of cool meets there. You can see a cool photo on the top left of a meet of two trains. That the train that's heading towards us was on the move, and the one that's in the foreground it was parked on a siding. And of course, I was able to get a couple of photos, in other places. And there's a tunnel there to be able to take some really cool shots. It's not a super long tunnel. You can actually see in the photograph, you're able to see to the other end. But yeah, some really cool places. Here's another meet I was able to get. Of course, train facing us is waiting for the train that's heading away from us to pass. This is one of those parks. If this locomotive wasn't parked there, you'd be able to see the park on the other side of the track. So you'd cross over the tracks, and then there's a park there to watch the boat traffic. Not in the shot. There's actually the train depot that's still there, and I believe they use that for events, for weddings and what have you. Great spot, parking lot there. You can park and take photos, and of course go into the park and enjoy the river traffic and of course the train traffic. All right, that wraps up the presentation. I just want to tell you a little bit about Train Aficionado. I've been trying to create a channel where rail fans have a place to be able to read up about history and current events through the blog. Also having the 2 shows. So if you want to support the channel, go right ahead. I do have hats, t-shirts, and hoodies, and all types of other things. So you can purchase your Train Aficionado gear at trainaficionado.com. And of course, it goes to the various things like streaming services and equipment that we're trying to improve so we can bring the trains essentially to you whenever we're rail fanning. As I mentioned earlier, started the YouTube channel in full force. So what you'll find on Train Aficionado's YouTube channel is rail fanning videos, scanner tips, interviews, rail fanning photography, all that stuff. Live on YouTube on the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of every month, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, live on YouTube. And of course, there's tons of videos there. Had a couple of videos with Danny Harmon. You can check out the current Danny Harmon interview on the channel right now. And here's a slide reminding you about Danny Harmon's interview. All right, so many of you may have attended the rail fanning with a scanner class. We have a tentative dates. We're going to do night school. A lot of people are saying they're not able to get to the Saturday morning class. So I've got penciled in right now a night class, which will be Thursday, September the 14th. So it'll be the Thursday after our September meeting, 7 to 9 p.m. So about 2 hours. I'll go through a slide deck. We'll talk about, scanners and how they're beneficial to you when you're out rail fanning. And then we will do another Scanner 101 in the fall. So if you're not able to attend that class, we will have a day school session on Saturday, October the 14th, 7 to 9 p.m. And basically, I go over the benefits of having a scanner and how to operate it. And it's a lot of fun for you guys to be able to learn how to take full advantage of that scanner. And then if you don't own a scanner, come to the class. You'll be able to learn the benefits of having one. And currently, right now, scanners, for rail fanning are not that expensive until they eventually go to digital, which is a long ways off. You can get a portable scanner for roughly $130. It's not terribly expensive. I mean, some of the digital scanners you're looking at $600 to $700. So thankfully, the railroads are still using analog communication, so you can get a scanner that's much more affordable. If you have any questions, for the audience that are watching online, you can email me at trainaficionado@gmail.com. Check out the website, trainaficionado.com is the website. And then we're on social media all across Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Train Aficionado. That wraps up tonight's presentation. Do you guys have any questions?
Talk about Saturday.
Saturday, yes, I think I do have. Let me see, do I have? No, I don't have. I have this slide. So Saturday, we're going to do a rail fanning meetup. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of the slide presentation at Winton Junction. And we're going to be rail fanning up there with a lot of the people from the class that have attended several of the classes. I actually had over the winter months, I would say. We had about 3 classes. We had a 101, a 102, and a 103. So I went over the benefits of having the scanners. I did a like if somebody missed any of the classes, I did a recap at the beginning of any one of those classes, so anybody could hop in during any one of those classes. So from 9 to noon, we're going to be out rail fanning. Bring your scanner, bring a comfortable chair, a drink, sit back and watch the trains. And then we plan on doing, hopefully, in the month of July, and then hopefully something in August. I'll be announcing that on the Train Aficionado website. So if you go to trainaficionado.com, there's an event tab. You're able to see all the events that we have going on. And eventually, once the club launches their website, there'll be an event tab there as well. So that about wraps it up. Is there any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you clarify where
Witten Place, excuse me. Sorry about that. So that's...
You go up one canal route?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that's... Yeah, so I'm still learning the Cincinnati, Ohio area. Those of you that are watching the program online, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wrap up things for the online broadcast. I hope that everybody has a great and wonderful evening and safe rail fanning out there.